As I get ready to review this new Nick Cave album from 2024 entitled Joy, I want to just start off by saying I'm not going to do my usual caveats where I talk about the fact that I am a bad Nick Cave fan, where I talk about how I associate him too much with my ex-wife. Instead, I want to start off not really with a joke, but with something funny. My daughter, my 16-year-old daughter, not my 2-year-old, not my two-week-old, she legitimately never knows when I'm talking about Nick Cave or Nick Cage. And we'll watch an entire movie and she'll be like, wow, Nick Cave was great in that. Or we'll listen to music and she'll be like, is this Nick Cage? She legitimately, in her mind, does not know the difference between one and the other. And I find that funny. When I was a kid, I didn't know the difference between Barry Manilow and Howie Mandel. I thought, and this is true, that Bob Hope and the Pope were the exact same person. So let's just start off with that kind of fun, joyous joke, which makes sense because the album is called Joy, after all. Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who did his first ever negative review on the album Ghostine by Nick Cave. Now you can watch that. It's an old video. Very few people who watch my stuff now still watch that. Our Family in Motion. I see you. I know you're watching this. I know you were there back then. But even when I'm saying anything negative about Nick Cave, like, I always have to caveat it with this sort of suspicion that I'm wrong, right? Because I always believe, don't trust negative critics, trust artists. If the artists have given you something good, they're probably still giving you something good. I apologize, by the way, if the sound of the wind is bothering you. I promise you, you will appreciate the sound of this wind by the end of this video. You will see why this album is titled Conversion when I explain to you the meaning of the wind behind me. But when I was listening to the album Ghostine, you know, I'm a very sentimental guy. I'm a very emotional guy. I love my family very much. And the album Ghostine, it was just too close. It was too close to the bone, you know? It was just right on there. You know, there's a great quote from La Rochefoucauld, 17th century French moralist, who said, "Le soleil ni la mort ne se peuvent regarder fixement." So neither the sun nor death can be looked at fixedly, right? And so that's what that album was looked like. It was like staring into the sun, but instead of it being the sun, it was death itself. So I didn't like that album, but I also sort of understood. I sort of understood it might be on me. Now, I liked Carnage. I thought Carnage was quite good. And as I've done a sort of autopsy of my career as a Nick Cave fan, basically I spent 6 years as a real Nick Cave fan, okay? I don't know. I don't think I started with Murder Ballads. I think I started with Henry's Dream there. And then I dipped back. And I got, The Good Son. I got a bunch of birthday party CDs. Lost those in the divorce. I think The Boatman's Call ended up being my favorite album. But I like Grinder Man too. I got that later. But really the main thing that was the dividing line was No More Shall We Part. I discussed this in my previous reviews. I hated this album. Okay? There's something about the thinness of his voice here that I absolutely hated. I didn't like the way he kept talking about his nurse. Now, maybe that was because he was in recovery. I don't know. I always assumed that he got clean in the late 80s. I didn't know this might have actually been a recovery album. But for whatever it was, I wanted something out of Nick Cave, something out of the illustrated biography. We're talking like early days Nick Cave and the cool guy with the cigarette, the kind of sexy goth vampire dude, the sort of frizzy haired bad boy, drunken menace kind of guy. That's what I wanted, and that was not it. I wanted the murder ballads, the stories, the religion stuff, but the religion stuff that was cool, man. Like a cool, yeah, what about Jesus, man? I wanted the guy, who made me feel the way he felt listening to Johnny Cash. He talks about Johnny Cash being his true hero, and instead I had what was essentially Lin-Manuel Miranda before Lin-Manuel Miranda singing about my nurse. But the truth is, and I said this before, that's a me problem, not a him problem. I liked Grinder Man, I liked Dig Lazarus Dig, but the truth is, the greatest thing an artist can do is try to lose you, which is why this new album, Joy, is such a joy. Why it's a conversion. That's why it's called Conversion, because it's a return to Nick Cave. But for me, me personally, he didn't go anywhere. He kept doing what he was doing. When I was 22, I couldn't vibe with what he was making when he was 44, because I was 22. And when you're 22, you don't want to listen to a 44-year-old. I can listen to a dude in his late 30s being kind of mystical and goth and talking about, fat boy's butthole, blah, blah, red right hand, all that stuff. But I couldn't vibe with it. So this album represents the return of Nick Cave. But just to me. He's never gone anywhere. He's been a great artist all the way through. If you like this kind of analysis, and I will get to some analysis, don't worry, we're going to talk about 16th century mystics, all that stuff. But if you like it at any point, please smash the like bucket, please subscribe, please type in AVAA that means awesome video as always. I'm trying to heart them as much as I can. I used to heart every single one, but now I get a lot of viewers and it's great. And then when I start on my phone too much, my little toddler comes over and pushes my phone away. So what do you want me to do? So what is this album? Well, one thing I can say is that, he's 65 now and I'm 40, almost 47 in 2 weeks. And yeah, we're the same age. At this point, we're the same age. Had kids, lived a lot of life. And this album is one of those rare things, a great old age album. Obviously Johnny Cash made some great old age albums. Bob Dylan continues to make great old age albums. A certain wisdom comes over you when you get older, and that wisdom gets put into the music, and that's what's in here. And it's really a lot about death. But it's not like Ghostine, which, if you don't know, Ghostine was made directly after his, 15-year-old son died in the town of Brighton in England, I guess where Nick Cave lives, which I guess means I'm always trying to figure out which Premier League team I'm supporting. I'm in between Fulham and Brighton. Please tell me in the comments, if you're British, which of those two teams should I support? Okay? As an American. One of them seems so lame it's cool, and then the other seems so cool it's lame. I'll let you figure that out. Anyways, the sadness, getting back to it, Ghostine was about sort of like one death, was about grief. But the thing is, and I lived with my dad for the last couple years of his life, and it's just, if you know old people, it's a lot about just losing people. It's a lot about looking back. It's a lot about finding joy, finding happiness in the life that you have. And this album is that. This is an album filled with joy. That's why it's called Joy. That's why that's the actual title of this album. It says it right across in embossed letters, Joy. And it's a joy that's hard-earned. Because you can be joyful. You can be a joyful idiot. But when your joy comes after grief, when your joy comes after mourning like this does, it is transcendent. This is a transcendently joyful album. This album made me feel things that he could never make me feel. I love Murder Ballads with every ounce of my goddamn soul. I love this album so much, but it didn't make me feel 1/10, 1/100th of this. This sarcastic, dark, as he said in an interview, nasty guy right here couldn't make me feel the way this album makes me feel. Speaking of that interview, have you seen... Okay, I'm going to say something I never thought I would say. There's a great segment from Stephen Colbert on YouTube. Now, I love I love Colbert's satire. I thought the Colbert Report was brilliant, all that, but I don't think he's a particularly good late show host. But he interviewed Nick Cave, and if you haven't seen it, just please watch it. I'll include a link in the description. It is like the old days. It is like a Mike Douglas, Dick Cavett style interview. I don't know how it exists or how it happens, but it's a very profound study of grief and discussion of grief. And in that, Nick Cave explains his belief, or Nick Cage, if you're my daughter, explains grief, devastation, as he calls it, makes you a fully formed person. That, like, before you experience grief in any real profound way, you can't really be a completely formed person. And it's this fascinating moment, where Colbert sort of points at that and says how maybe, that it's a lucky thing. Like, we're lucky if we love enough to lose somebody, to care enough to lose. It's a very meaningful interview that reflects the very meaningful nature of this album. Now listen, when I was a young hipster and I liked Nick Cave like every other young hipster, well, I got into Nick Cave because I rented Wings of Desire from Videosmith and I watched a German movie and he was in it. He's always been there with the Jesus-y stuff. You know, I mean, he's doing Bob Dylan covers of the religious phase back in The Good Son. Okay, he's got For and a Cruise. He's always had this kind of religious-y stuff. But what I like now is that he's old. He's old, and I think he really believes it. And I think maybe that's not great for hipsters who like to think of religion as like a thing where they can go to the church and they can recognize the characters and it's like a play. I think he really feels it. But let's just remember what kind of religious person Nick Cave is. He's a mystic. It's an important term, mystic. It doesn't just mean magical or interesting or pizza movies with Julia Roberts. Like, mysticism is a very important current, especially in Christianity, that has a very personal sort of one-on-one relationship with God. Mystics are often seen as being strange or bizarre because they have the belief, they have this sort of sense of God and Christ sort of entering them. And it's a part of the Christian tradition, but it's always kind of against the church because it doesn't need the intermediary of a priest or an abbot or whatever. It's a kind of union with God. And that union sometimes can be kind of sexual, which works perfectly with how Nick Cave makes his music that's always kind of sexual and kind of godly and kind of earthly. And that kind of mysticism, I think, is, in my humble, fake-ass Nick Cave fan opinion, okay? My in-and-out Nick Cave fan, okay? Like, he's released, 79 albums, and I only love 30 of them, okay? I don't know what the ratio actually is. But I think this album does as good of a job as I've ever heard him do of being a true mystic. A mystic who's actually capable of touching me religiously. This album touches me religiously. You know, my dad was a minister. I used to go to church every week. Okay, I'm a fairly Christian guy, even though I don't proselytize. I don't agree with the church most of the time. But this was able to touch me as a religious work of art. Now, a lot of that's because the music's so good. It's super well made. It's not like trying to sound like old Nick Cave, but it's also just, it has enough of the sort of cool, I don't know. Like, there's something about this album. The first time I listened to it, I didn't vibe with it as much as I do now. I've been listening to it just nonstop for the last couple of days. Sorry, I got my slippers on. It's kind of cold out here. It's like every song is like an epic outro, or like a cinematic musical. You know, it seemed to me the first time like every single song ended with like "Save me, stop, come to me, come with me, joy." There's this whole like feeling where almost every song could be the very end of an album. It is interesting now that he has had this experience with death that I often think of Nick Cave as being the most fun death teller. I mean, that's why Murder Ballads is such a great album, because it's all these stories about murder and death, and it's all kind of neat and cool. And it's fascinating that he doesn't play with that anymore. You know, like he doesn't play with it anymore. It's nothing to play with. It's a serious thing that's been in his life. I don't. The album, I'm going to start off with my stamp. The example song, I guess this was the lead single. I don't know. I wasn't listening to the singles because I didn't think I was going to review this, because I didn't think I was going to like it, because I thought I was out. I thought I was out on Nick Cave. But we're going to go with Long Dark Night. It's a song all about the Chris Nolan Batman movies. I get one joke per video. I just spent it on that. I regret it. Long Dark Night. Maybe I like this because it's the most kind of old school Nick Cave sounding song, you know, big, religious, heartfelt. His voice is strong, you know, it's not the my nurse kind of thin voice sort of thing. Beautiful chord progression. It goes down at a certain point where you don't expect it to. The song is 3 minutes and 33 seconds long. Is that some kind of weird Christ-like numerology? Yes. It is. Absolutely it is. I wouldn't put it past him. The arpeggiated chords on the piano are joined by this guitar after one line, and these lyrics. He's talking about this night that he's having, where he has this kind of dream, and his whole life is living in a dream, and he's having a long dark night that's maybe a week or maybe a year. Okay? Which means we have to talk about the long dark night. Now, he did reference in his Red Right blog, or blog right hand, whatever it's called, his blog that he has on his website, which is the coolest fan interaction I've ever seen. I don't know. You try to tell me cooler fan interaction than Nick Cave writing really long letters in responses to people's fans. Man, I am totally back. I am a bigger Nick Cave fan now than I was 20 years ago. Just over the past 4 days, getting back into this album. It's also, I think it's free. I've been divorced for 10 years, so that whole bit can just be sort of, just go. So, The Long Dark Night, he did say he's inspired by St. John of the Cross, the poet from Toledo, not Ohio, Toledo, Spain, Toledo. Noche obscura del alma, the dark night of the soul. We're talking about mystics. Nick Cave is putting himself in the tradition of this mystic, this man, St. John of the Cross, who lived in Toledo, who had this moment of what is called passive conversion. He wrote this poem of passive purification, this sense of sitting in there one night and being totally cleansed and purified and unified with God in a way which is definitely sexual. It definitely is. It's a definitely kind of sexual poem, but not sexual like... I'm not trying to say it's a queer-coded... No, I'm not saying that. It's just saying that the ecstasy, the joy that he feels... Well, first of all, just remember that joy comes from the French word joie, which also means coming. So just for the sake... When we talk about joy, and when we talk about ecstasy, a lot of the terms that we use that refer to religious joy and happiness are actually very connected to sexuality. I don't think Nick Cave is going to watch this analysis, but if he is, he'd love that point. That much I know. By the way, there's no significance to Cookie Monster being back there. That's just where my 2-year-old put Cookie Monster, and I decided not to move him. We got sirens in my town. Ooh, kind of goth, kind of old school. It's Labor Day when I'm recording this. That's why I'm wearing white. Don't you know you're not supposed to wear white after Labor Day? So I'm going to quote this poem to you about the Long Dark Night because it's essential. It's essential to understand what Nick Cave is trying to say with the song. O noche que guiaste, o noche amable más que el alborada. O noche que juntaste amado con amada, amada and el amado transformada. O night that guided me, O night more lovely than the dawn, O night that joined beloved with lover, lover transformed in the beloved. Talking about his mystical union with Christ, as is Nick Cave here. The night more lovely than the dawn. How can the night be more lovely than the dawn? When we constantly use night and darkness as a way of explaining the glory of life and of light. I want to go back to that goddamn Stephen Colbert interview, which should not have been as good as it was. You're lucky. If you enter a dark night of the soul, you're lucky. You're lucky if you enter a dark night of the soul, because when you enter a dark night of the soul, it ends at a certain point. That dark night of the soul, whatever point you go through. When I think about the dark nights of the soul, I used to have dark nights of the soul on this very porch. Well, before we redid it. On this very porch, I used to sit here listening to Random Access Memories, drinking pastis and smoking cigarettes and staring out over the lawn. And I put my hands on my hips and I would say that I'm the king of nothingness because I was going through a divorce and my kids weren't in the house and I would have little pity parties, okay? That was my dark night of the soul, okay? If you can't imagine me doing that, good. But I needed to get here on this nice porch with the happy marriage and the happy family. I needed to get here. And the way the music comes here, where the chorus comes, and there's this little female voice in the back, and then we get to this amazing moment of his passive purification. Through the door of my dream burst. This whole album, by the way, is basically Nick Cave lying in bed and a bunch of stuff happening to him. Through the door, my dream burst. No zombie, no ogre, no devil there, but a man flying with long trailing hair, who perched upon the iron rail of my bed, O Lord, combing his long white hair, saying my name. How could he know when I did not even know my name? He's having this moment of purification. He's having this long dark night of the soul. This lush instrumentation creeps up on you with more and more guitars and strings. It falls apart at the end of the second chorus. The man who took me to be from elsewhere when I too inhabited earthly sphere leant down and struck me with his long trailing hair. Sweet, intimate, erotic, transcendent. A beautiful outro with slight Angelo Badalamenti tones here. So many guitars just close it up all at once. And I think that's why I chose this song, because it's the long dark night of the soul that he's been going through, and that this album is what happens when you come out of that night. And again, to quote St. John of the Cross, "O dawn, more beautiful than day." That's the human truth that he's getting at after dealing with the death of his fucking son. Excuse my language, but it's still too much. It's still too much for me to even think of. Okay, I'm going to go through the rest of the album a little bit quicker, but I'm going to slow down at one point. We get to the song Song of the Lake. Kind of nice thumping, simple bass here. Almost spoken words about an old man looking at a woman bathing. I was like, oh no, this isn't going to be a horny old man album. It's not. It's not at all. It's sort of doing that thing of where often artists will, traditionally in the Western art tradition, they will use a beautiful woman as a symbol of time flying, as the fleeting nature of life is tied into the fleeting nature of beauty. And so an old man sitting on a beach looking at a beautiful woman bathing, it's not a horn dog situation. Okay. Most poetry, even if it's about time flying, is usually a horn dog situation. But still, what I love is the way he writes this line, that he would dissolve if he went into the lake, and if he stood on the shore, he would over time evaporate. That this is the problem. If he went in and tried to join this young woman, if he tried to partake in the joys of youth as though he were young, he would dissolve. But if he just stays where he is, he will evaporate. This is the problem of age. This is the problem of time. This is the problem of death. Always, always encroaching, which is what makes this whole chorus so beautiful. All the king's horses, oh, never mind, never mind. He sets you up for a banal retelling of Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a big fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back again, right? That's the little nursery rhyme of Humpty Dumpty. I apologize, my hair's going all Superman. I don't know what to. I'm in the wind for reasons which I will describe in a second. But I like that he abandons this. Oh, never mind, never mind. And there's a tiredness to his voice. There's a certain point where the sounds drop out, and it's just this bell. Red right handy bell, and bass, and voice, and just this never mind, his resignation. And it's sort of about the impotence of old age, but I don't think it's impotence in terms of like not being able to boinky boink. I think it's more just of just understanding just that life is just gonna end, you know. And then he finally says all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put us back together again. He builds up the suspense and he finishes the nursery rhyme. Oh, my darling, where do we go? Never mind, never mind. We're sort of lost in this place where we can't really, that we're all, that's life, that we're just that old man on the lake. Next track is called Wild God. I know, I've been a little silly Billy, and I've been saying that the album is called Joy, or that the album is called Conversion. But according to Red Right blog, he wanted to name the album Joy or Conversion, but they decided it was too religious, so they went with Wild God. I don't like that they made that decision. That's, as a matter of fact, my least favorite thing about the whole album. If you're going to have an album about joy and conversion, have it be about that. This is the worst song on the album. It's the worst title. I don't. It's fine. It's still a good song, but I don't know. This God zoomed and entombed. The themes are a little too kind of goofy and dark, and the way he did, it's a little too Dylan-y on his delivery. And he flew through a dying city like a prehistoric bird. That's exactly how he sings it. I do like how the horns come in. I like the instrumental break, the rolling bass and understated drums, and the harpsichord style on the second verse. But I don't know, like, just I'm a wild god. I think he's I feel like he's been a wild god. You know, I feel like the wild godness is what I like. That's what I associate with the wild godness. You know what I'm saying? Like in the old days and running around and raping and pillaging and all that stuff in the old folks' home. Like that's what I associate. You know, and this feels to me this album is beyond wild god. But don't worry, because the next song, absolutely, I actually would prefer over Wild God if the album were called Frogs. Cool, unexpected, arpeggiated high synth sounds, more solid bass, by Colin Greenwood of Radiohead. He's not a bad seed. He's an Ed. I'm actually waiting for my signed copy of Colin Greenwood's book. Should be coming anytime, I hope. Spend a little bit of dosh on that. That does bug me a little bit that it's like end the bad seeds, but Mick Harvey's obviously hasn't been around for a while, and like it does bug me a little bit that they use the term bad seeds. It's not all the bad seeds, but whatever. I'm not a real enough fan to make that complaint. Not much structure in this song, but I love it because it's about jumping for joy and jumping for love and kind of confusing ideology like frog marching. It makes reference to Chris Christopherson. And when you're talking about Sunday morning, then you're thinking about Chris Christopherson's... Oh, God, I have Chris Christopherson's first album. By the way, if you've never listened to Chris Christopherson's first album entitled Christopherson, you owe yourself. Ooh, it's a good album. Whatever it is you like about Nick Cave, Chris Christopherson is offering that to you on that album. Was it Sunday Morning Coming Down? Is that what the song's called? And he's like all in his dirty shirt, and he's just walking around and sees someone kicking a can, and he makes reference to that. It's an interesting song. If you read the Red Right blog, he explains that it's basically a story about him and his wife coming back from church, and it's about the joy, because that's the thing. It's just this joy. It's just the joy. Leaping around like frogs and being in the rain. As he said in his blog, frog is the laudatory and epigrammic paean to the cosmos as we sometimes find it, the cosmos tilting towards love and reveling in its own insistent beauty. It's my man. Cosmos tilting towards love, right? This dude has earned it, all right? To say such a happy-dappy, dippy-dippy-doo thing after you've been through the kind of suffering he's been through, it's just an amazing moment. Speaking of amazing moments, we arrive at joy. And the reason that I'm recording this outside, this song, can I just tell you, has touched me in a way that very few songs have ever touched me. And I was not expecting it. I'd listened to it 10 times. I really enjoy, the tinkling piano sounds and these horns that come in, these nice French horns that come in. And I sort of got it. But what ended up happening was I ended up having sort of a religious conversion. I kind of had an apotheosis right here on this porch in this very wind that's blowing around me right now. So let me explain. So obviously the song, I feel as though the song is him in his bed. Okay, so he's in his bed. I saw a movement around my narrow bed, a ghost in giant sneakers, laughing stars around his head. I assume this is his son coming to visit him in his night. Now listen. That way. 3 doors down. Do you understand? 3 doors. Okay, so there's this house, one other, and then the other house over there is where my parents lived the last years of their life. Okay? They moved up here in late 2015. My mom died October 2016. My dad died February 2022. Okay? So I lived a long time with my dad after his wife of 52 years had died. And he would tell me constantly, that he felt as though she were just in the next room. Always, that's what he said. And he would have dreams, like once a month, of where she was alive and talking to him. And the feeling that he had, that he expressed to me, was this feeling of joy, but also exhaustion, which is why the next line in the Nick Cave song, "Have mercy on me." It's like it would be easier not to feel like she were just in the next room, or that they were not 2 doors down that way, okay? It would be easier to not feel when I drive by and see that the family that lives there now has their garage door up, that it's not my father, who always left his garage door open to the great consternation of his neighbors. He never closed it ever, not even during snowstorms. I see that garage door open and I feel like I'm about to turn down the walkway and walk up and see him sitting on his little chair waiting to say hello to me, okay? Have mercy on me, heaven, okay? That's the way you feel with loss. And this ghost sat on a narrow bed, this flaming boy, he said, "We have all had too much sorrow. Now is the time for joy." Which is why the album is, in my estimation, called Joy. because Ghostine was the ghost and the sadness and the death and the mourning. And here we have with this beautiful detail of this big sneaker, like you know it's a kid, it's a teenager, it's a teenager with this big sneaker. Have mercy. And the French horn rises. Burn, 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 burn. And then he goes on this whole little thing about, like, and they shout bad words, they shout angry words. All across the world they shout their angry words about the end of love, yet the stars stand above the earth, bright, triumphant metaphors of love, because that's the thing. No matter what kind of universe we live in, no matter what kind of J.D. Vance is worse or better than Tim Walz, whatever kind of, you shouldn't go to the prince's coronation, or whatever kind of whatever kind of non-centrist world, whatever kind of, like, extreme world we live in, that you can feel like love is over and that love is dead. But Nick Cave is telling us in his great joy, through his great misery, that love is triumphant, which is why he keeps repeating, for joy, for joy, for joy. So what happened to me was I was sitting right there on that couch, okay? I was sitting right there on the couch, and I was listening on that speaker right over there to this song, okay? I was sitting with my 2-year-old daughter, playing with Cookie Monster, and she saw a bug. Whenever she sees a bug, she calls it out in Serbian, because she's bilingual. She doesn't really speak anything yet, but she says, booba, booba. And I'm like, yeah. And I mean, yeah, some bugs eat leaves, some bugs eat poop, kind of laughing about that. They all kind of fly around. And just at that moment, while I'm listening to this music, while the French horn is going, and it reminds me of my son when he was a teenager practicing French horn in the next room, and, like, I'm missing him. He's down in Maryland. He's fine, but, I still miss him every day. And, like, the wind just starts blowing. Now, listen, I understand. I'm not a meteorologist, okay? This is not some mystical thing, okay? The wind's blowing because the wind's blowing, and that's why the wind blows. There's no God that's telling the wind to blow the direction from where my parents lived while I am with the granddaughter that they don't know, or they could never know. Okay? But yeah, God sent the wind. If you don't believe that, fuck you. Okay? So I'm sitting there. No, you don't have to believe it. I don't care. I'm sitting there, and I'm having this moment, and this music provided it for me. And like, the entire existence that I have had with this artist, with this kind of weird posery vampire dude who's all this kind of thing, and all that, and my ex-wife, and I saw him perform in San Francisco in 2001. It was one of the worst concerts I've ever seen. He was terrible. All the time I've been waiting, ever since seeing Wings of Desire, I thought he'd be the greatest thing ever, and he just wasn't. All these memories that I have, and then it's just arriving at this moment where I felt this great communion with this great mystic who's describing this moment, just as St. John of the Cross did. And I'm having this moment, this mystical moment of connection and joy. Next track is called First Rescue Attempt. Another strange, kind of unexpected sound, a little military snare under here, kind of flanges in. More kind of haunting imagery of wind and rain. The chorus is gently touching. I will always love you. I assume that's to some of the people he's lost. I don't know. It's just great. It's just a lot of love. The album also could have just been called Love, because there's just so much love in this album. Then we get to Conversion, which I think is the B-side to Joy. Kind of Twin Peaks sounding synth. The drums are super far in the background. It's really just a bed for his poetry, his beautiful poetry here, and all about, like, this place with these walls. It feels sort of almost pre-Christian. It sort of reminds me a little bit of what PJ Harvey is up to right now. I mean, I always consider them together, just in my head. Now then, a girl across the street with long dark hair knelt among the stones in the mystical flare, and the old god drew her into him like a flame, and I've never seen you so beautiful like that again. Weird play with pronouns like who is she and you and all that, and old gods and new gods. And then the choir almost sounds like Power by Kanye. That was a very intense mourning dove. Sorry, got a lot of mourning doves on our porch here. And then it just ends with just stop, stop, stop. You're beautiful. And to me, it feels like it's connected to the have mercy on me thing. The kind of sense of just like, stop visiting me, stop being a ghost. I don't know. Touched by a flame, more of this mystical connection. Cinnamon Horses, very cinematic intro. Whole thing's really nice, cool kind of double guitar here. It's all about him talking about his life being sweet, and these cinnamon horses through the turpentine trees. Okay, number one, I didn't know that turpentine came from trees. It makes sense. Turpentine is a very kind of weirdly toxic thing that painters use to clean their brushes, I believe. I didn't know that those trees came from Australia, where Nick Cage is from, New South Wales. It's cool. It ties into these castle ruins that seems like it's fit into the last song. There's like these songs end up connecting really nicely. I said we should not hurt one another. Still we hurt one another. And a dozen white vampires sun themselves in the castle ruins. You said that, ooh, it feels almost like he is accepting guilt for the fact that his optimism and his belief in the power of love and the joy that should overcome the world doesn't always work. Then we get to the Stand Up Long Dark Night, and then we get to oh wow, how wonderful she is. If there's ever a song that needed context brought to you by the Right Red blog, this is the one. So if you don't know that this song is dedicated to a different person he lost, okay, Anita Lane. Someone who used to sing with him on multiple songs, somebody who was his former lover, somebody who worked with Mick Harvey on that interesting Serge Gainsbourg album when Mick Harvey like translated Serge Gainsbourg songs into English, which is totally great if you don't speak French, but just listen to the originals. But still, it's a good album, and she basically plays Brigitte Bardot and Jane Birkin and Charlotte Gainsbourg. Like she plays like all of the females in Gainsbourg's life. So that's pretty powerful. And, she died recently, old, not super old. It's not like the tragedy of his kids. And so that's what I'm talking about. This is an old person album. Kind of snaps, kind of poppy. It's a memorial song, and I think this is one of the people, right? What album is Death Is Not the End on? I thought Death Is Not the End was on The Good Son, but it's not. Damn, well, anyways, his cover of Death Is Not the End is just an amazing cover, and she's one of the voices on there. So that makes sense that Death Is Not the End by great mystic Bob Dylan, interpreted by great mystic Nick Cave with Anita Lane. And we get the sense that she is sort of a ghost in this song with this kind of vocoder sound in the background. We have this opening line. She rises in advance of her panties. Oh my God. I don't care if you're Nick Cave, dude. 65-year-old dude should not be saying panties. False, okay? I don't know if this is on purpose, but you ever see the movie Anatomy of a Murder, directed by Otto Preminger, starring James Stewart? There's a whole... There's a whole plot line in that movie all about not saying the word panty because it seems inappropriate, but it's actually necessary in the term of the crime. So let's just say that's fine, because this is a song of him remembering this woman who he used to be with. Now he does say no one can compare. Dude, you're married. I'm not like an expert on how to be happy. Well, actually, I am an expert on how to be happily married, okay? Maybe I'll start a YouTube channel on that. Don't write songs about ex-lovers saying no one can compare while still married to your wife. But anyways, that's his style here. And then at the end, we had this really charming moment where she leaves a voicemail. And if you go to page 73 of this actually rather excellent biography, you can see a picture of Nick and Anita together. And this really shows how they were as collaborators and friends and flunkies and lovers and all of that. So she has this whole line, I remember we were in bed and we imagined somebody upstairs. I don't even know if we heard footsteps or imagined footsteps. And then imagine the story. There's that little place opposite Brixton Prison. I didn't even realize that everyone wasn't like that. Ha 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 ha. We tried to write a contract of love, but we only got so far as doing the border. There was never any words in it. which I thought said a lot more than anything else. So like there were people who didn't really know how to properly love each other, but they knew that, and that in and of itself was the way that they loved each other. It's a fascinating story. It's a fascinating tribute. And then the album ends with a hymn, As the Waters Cover the Sea. Did he write this hymn? Did he find this in a hymnal? I don't know, and I won't look it up. As far as I'm concerned, this was written by, Father John Scrabbinich in Brighton in, 1870. Okay, and Father John Scrabbinich wrote this little hymn, and Nick Cave found it at his local church. Or Nick Cave wrote it. I don't know. It doesn't really matter because it's just a straight-up hymn. It starts off with a kind of traditional Nick Cave style, her, and then leads into this beautiful diatribe about the waters covering the sea and God loving you and reflecting all the joy that's around him. So anyways, these are my Patreons. They help me to buy music. I don't know if I'm going to buy this album. It's hard to listen to Nick Cave in this house with all the negative associations. We can't even watch National Treasure. But Raising Arizona, that one we can make it through. So anyways, tell me in the comments, what is your favorite Nick Cave movie? Is it Raising Arizona? And what's your favorite Nick Cage album? My favorite Nick Cave album? I think it's Wild God. There's the camera.